Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, we're ticking this summer with something unusual. There's a contested race for an open state legislative seat in New Haven. We elect state reps and state senators every 2 years, but they never really have competition. The same people stay in for 30, 40 years, and that's actually not a knock. You know, there's an argument that people have experience that bring to that, but they're there for life. Now, all of a sudden, by surprise this year, the 94th General Assembly seat is open. Robin Porter is moving on. And we have two strong candidates who are campaigning hard, who have real campaigns, who are giving voters options for the primary that takes place August 13th, is it?
That's right, August 13th.
And Steve Winters is one of those candidates, and Abdul Asmanu is the other one. He was here recently on the air. Steve is with us today, going for the Democratic nomination. Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for coming.
Good morning. It's good to be on with you. Thanks so much for having me.
So you've run for Alder before and won. You're now the city's climate czar. You've worked on statewide campaigns for other candidates.
That's your title, the climate czar.
You don't like that title?
Oh, it's funny. It's just...
right, you don't really have much power when it's a staff of one, right? And you guys see people pretty pleased.
One
Let's
and a half.
recycle it of solar power.
We have a part-time recycling educator now who's doing great. Rose is doing great
So
work.
It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah,
because
it's very tongue-in-cheek.
You can't really order everybody to use solar power.
I just chime in because it is what everyone calls me out in the community. Yeah, it's become the title.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I feel good about that.
Yeah.
Given that you think it's fun.
It's stuff.
I'd feel bad about it if you didn't like it. So that's where you are today. You've helped Ann Malloy get elected. You've worked for other campaigns, and now you're the one running to go to the Capitol. How's it going, and why are you running?
Well, I worked for Lamont many years ago, following around Dan Malloy.
But then he tried to hire you.
He tried to hire me, yeah. The campaign's going really well. It's been great getting out on the doors. Folks have been really receptive in Hamden and New Haven. I think there's, the border or the line between the two municipalities is very much imaginary.
Because we're talking about Southern Hamden.
Yep, Southern Hamden. So it's basically the district. This is an approximation, but it's more or less if you took Whitney, Dixwell, there's a little chunk of Dixwell that's missing, and Elm, and went up to the Hamden border, and then more or less Edgerton Park in Hamden, all the way over to West Rock, bound by more or less by Putnam and Helen. There's some more to
Elm
it than
Street?
It comes all the way down to Elm. Yeah.
Oh, is that because of Ward 2? It's nothing to do with that.
I don't know. It's just the way it
changes too around that area.
Yeah.
Okay. Over the years. So why are you running?
Why am I running? I think our district needs representation that is responsive, that's effective, that's progressive. And I think I've got the track record working in city government for the last 7 years to bring that representation, to help people solve the problems, whether they're big or small, that are going to make a difference in their lives. That's the kind of work I was really excited about as an alder person. It's the kind of work I've tried to focus on as the city's climate and sustainability director. And that's really what motivates me. I thought that was the most gratifying thing being an alder person, whether it was something small like a corner naming sign or getting speed bumps put in, or larger things like getting the climate resolution passed, or working on housing code enforcement, strengthening housing code enforcement. Looking at the city budget, from the small things to the big things, we really can make a difference in people's lives. And
were you 3 years in Alder or 5?
5. Yeah,
we loved following you around because you really had a lot of great neighborhood issues. I remember when there was it flooding or was it a fire at the apartments across from the Mayo preschool?
That was roofing issues. Yes.
Yeah, and people need a place to stay. You're really advocating for them, and we'd show up and you'd be there.
And that property, Affordable Housing Preservation Company bought it to do a rehab, in part to fix the roofs, and their plan was to relocate people nearby to Shelton.
I remember, and they don't have cars.
Yeah. And they said they could take the bus. So I
oh my God,
I Googled
if you
it and I
taking
said,
the bus, you take 2 hours every 2 hours.
It would take 2 hours one way.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we worked with Legal Aid and LCI to get that straightened out. get higher stipends for people.
You never really called attention a lot to yourself as a politician. You didn't strike me as someone who was running for higher office. There are people who've been alder for 3 years, setting up to run for mayor and trying to get out. I noticed you like to work with people, and when you did have dissenting views, it was never done in a way where you were kind of trying to make some other alder look bad. Do you have to pivot and be a little more egotistical or contentious yourself to try to get the state office, or do you still think it's enough of an office that isn't celebrity oriented like a governor or a mayor or a president, where you could be that kind of like focused on the work, heavy on the doors, because the district is still small enough that you can actually win by one-on-one contact?
I'm not running to try to change who I am or how I approach the work. I want to stay focused on problem solving and helping people with the issues that matter to them. And it's, it's not about me. And if anything, it's the opposite, as myself, as a, white person representing, a very diverse district, I want to approach by leading with humility and with listening, and with really trying to understand, what we should be focused on, what we should be prioritizing. And so, definitely do not want to change that approach. And I think that approach of leading by listening, by finding common ground, by building coalitions, getting people to rally around things is about being being responsive is about following up with people. Being effective is about finding common ground, building support, building constituencies for things. And I think that, the endorsements I've gotten from the president of the Board of Alders, the president of the Hamden Legislative Council, both Mayor Garrett and Mayor Elliker, speaks to that ability to stay focused on addressing issues and collaborating. I think, there's definitely also a piece on the state level of knowing when to advocate for things and when to really stick up and stand out. And that's something I'm also not afraid to do. But it's, it's not about me. It's about whatever that particular issue is.
And we're talking to Steve Winter, a candidate for the Democratic nomination for the open 94th General Assembly seat. I know one of those issues is ranked choice voting, and how's that going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've always been interested in election reforms. From a young age, was really interested in the intersection between money and politics. Very proud to be running in the Citizens Elections program. I know Abdul is doing that as well. And it's a great system because it allows you to focus on, you raise your money and then you can just focus on talking with voters, addressing their issues, having those conversations. Did a lot of work with the national popular vote. So we were the first state, Connecticut was the first state after Donald Trump was elected in 2016 to sign on to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is a group of states that agree to pledge their electoral college votes to the National Popular Vote winner. Since then, I think Maryland has signed on. We're getting there, but we still have a ways to go. And then, looking at other ways to empower voters, give voters choice, and also build consensus. So I think ranked choice voting is an excellent.
So now there is a study group happening at the state level.
That's right. So another group that was really focused on this was Oz Griebel and Monty Frank. And so when Lamont gained the endorsement of the Frank,
he agreed to support.
Yeah,
the
he agreed to
he doesn't really support the idea. Yeah.
He agreed to support ranked choice voting.
So
commission.
one setback for some election reform agenda items include universal absentee balloting, online balloting, and I know there's a lot of evidence that largely goes without fraud in places like Oregon. I've always been concerned about absentee ballots. Just coming from a city, I feel like often workers are not following the rules and kind of forcing people or even getting people to sign when they don't really know what's going on, especially from a senior housing development and bringing the ballots. We've seen in Bridgeport that's just blown apart. Not only that they had widespread fraud over and over again by top-ranking Democrats in elections by harvesting absentee ballots, and we saw how unable the state's regulatory system is to deal with it. It was known in 2019 that it happened in 2018, and the State Elections Reform Commission never could take action to prevent the very same people from doing again in 2020 2, which is embarrassed, or I'm sorry, 2023, in Bridgeport, which has really set back arguments for election reform. Would you not agree with that, or how would you deal with it now that if you get to be in the legislature?
Well, I guess just to go back to ranked choice voting, I think that studying
Separate
it
issue.
is really important because there's the balloting,
And that's not corrupt.
tabulation.
That's just tabulating it.
Yeah,
It's
so
doable.
so if you have a three-way race and nobody wins the majority, then the person with the least votes gets removed and all of their second choice votes. So you rank 1, 2,
Right.
3. Here are my candidates.
So that way you don't have to worry about lesser two evils. You vote for who you want most, but then you have a backup if that person do well, and that vote will count against the person you don't like.
Yeah, and it can help build consensus because it helps us focus on where there's common ground.
Mm-hmm.
I think with no excuse absentee voting or voting by mail, we need to be very thoughtful if we head down that path to make sure that there are checks in place so that we're able to provide people with increased access, but that there's safeguards to make sure that we don't have corruption like that.
What issue are you hearing the most on the doors, as they say? When you knock on doors, what are people asking you the most? What issue do they care about most?
I think it's clearly serving our young people, addressing youth services, addressing education, and really investing in the next generation and giving each young person in New Haven and Hamden a real opportunity to succeed. And I think that there's some progress underway that I would love to be a part of in terms of making that happen. And I think it starts with having safe spaces for programming to take place. So in the adult education building that's planned for 188 Bassett Street, there's 3,000 square feet of community space that's been promised to be accessible community space for community programming. I think that's something we need to make sure the city and the state follow through on, and that it's something that it's not behind a locked door. It's going to be easily scheduled, easily accessible for community members.
Could you get state funding to have programs there?
Potentially, yeah. You could work with the state or with the city on programming, or with local nonprofits that want to use the space and maybe don't have their own brick and mortar. I think that's a really good opportunity for New Hallville. We need more spaces like that. On the other side of the town line, we have the old Hamden Middle School site, which Mayor Garrett and the council have proposed to turn into a community campus. And I think that when you say that, it's a recreation center, multifaceted recreation center, but youth services would definitely
And
be
would
a big
that
part of that.
duplicate add to what's happening at Keefe? Is it fully happening at Keefe?
I think it'd be on a larger scale, and it would really allow for more activities to happen, for more programming to take place than what currently happens at Keefe. And so I think that's another awesome opportunity to serve residents on both sides of the line. When you talk to people about what used to take place at the middle school when there were after-school programs, or when there was open rec nights, people from New Haven would come. Because it's really not very far. Like I said before, that line between the two municipalities is you barely notice the difference, if you notice it at all, when you're going up.
Except the very
Shelton or
subtle
Dixwell.
Shelton, the very subtle difference in the street signs.
Well, the
when you
street
cross Morse.
the street signs in Hamden, you've got one pole, and then they put both signs on. They're very economical, whereas we're mounting ours on utility
Or
poles.
Cherry Ann, where
typically.
one side is New Haven,
Yeah.
one's not. That's my favorite. Our little mini lightning round. You may or may not be voting on issues like this. A mansion tax is proposed by Martin Looney, or a conveyance tax surcharge for homes worth more than $1 million, or some number like that.
I think, Senator Looney's been at the state capitol for more than 4 decades. I think he's looking at this really strategically, and that approach, addresses some of the concerns about, like, well, what if you raised capital gains? Would that cause more wealthy people to move to Florida? These very large homes aren't going anywhere, and they are changing hands. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
So you think, or are you agnostic on whether it's increasing the conveyance tax or just the straight ahead state property tax on the mansions?
I think they both sound worth considering, and I'd want to see what how the math plays out, and then what are we using those funds for? Are you putting those funds into education? Are you using those funds to increase the property tax credit that working class families can get on their homes?
And what about the volatility cap? Much discussion. Some say that the 2017 bipartisan agreement on not spending more than a certain amount of money you get in quarterly returns on capital gains taxes should be dedicated only to the rainy day fund and paying down the debt. This past session, people saying, let's not renew it in full. Let's tweak it because we got more money than that than we thought, so we can use some money for pressing concerns such as higher ed funding and affordable housing. And others say get rid of it totally, and others say keep it in place because that kind of discipline has improved our financial picture, and our ratings agencies have improved our rankings so that we pay less in debt over time.
Yeah. I mean, there's the volatility cap, there's the revenue cap. I think that, on the one hand, the bipartisan budget agreement has been very successful in taking a big chunk out of the state's long-term liabilities. But this is a real issue of intergenerational equity, where this generation now, these young people who folks in the district are so concerned about, are having to pay off the burden of liabilities that were incurred in the past. And ultimately, that's going to improve the financial picture for people in the future. So, just like climate change, it's a real intergenerational equity issue, and we can't ignore the real distress, the real needs here in the present day. We've got to find a way to balance paying off those long-term liabilities.
So does that mean you're a tweaker? You're not a keep as is, and you're not a get rid of?
If those are the three paths, then yes.
Those are the three paths.
Yes, then I would say, adjusting or tweaking.
There was a proposal at the last minute, the last legislative session did not pass, was not debated, but will come up again, hopefully, probably, which was to offer unemployment benefits to strikers who have been on the line for more than 2 weeks. Very controversial. Lamont's against it. A lot of Democrats are for it, unless they are Republicans against. You for or against that?
Well, I think what happened at the end of the session, a lot of it had to do with the process, as I understand it.
Right. So what about the merits?
Looking at the issue itself, I think we really do need to support labor in our society. Labor is such a key piece. It's a foundational piece, a fundamental piece of our democracy, both moderating the polarization we see in wealth, and also the fact that they're inherently democratic. I did a stint running elections for unions for a year or so, and got to be part of that. And so I think it is worth supporting. Other states have done it, and the sky has not fallen. So, New York State has very similar legislation. And,
so you're for that. What about raising marginal tax rates on the wealthy? For instance, income over $1 million gets charged 7.44% rather than 6.99%. Lamont's kind of said no way. A lot of Democrats for a long time felt that should be done. Any thoughts on that?
I think it makes sense, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen under the current governor. And like you said before, we have ways of raising revenue
like
without.
Well,
you've got the Manson tax idea. You've got adjusting the volatility and spending caps could potentially help you meet needs in the current day. You also have other things like hiring additional auditors. CT Voices estimates that there's $2.6 billion in annual revenue that between what's owed and what's actually being paid to the state in taxes. And each auditor brings in roughly $2 million.
Oh.
So there are other things we could look at without all of those things, without raising those marginal rates. You've also got to look at, the merits of capital gains and the carried interest, issue of carried interest.
All right. And what about your work every day? And we're talking to Steve Winter, one of the candidates for the Democratic nomination for the 94th General Assembly seat. August 13th, the primary. Your day job is the climate coordinator and sustainability director for the city. What kind of specific environmental and climate change proposals would you make at the state, similar to what you're doing in the city?
I think there's so many ways that the city and the state can work together to address these issues. And I think one key piece would be our heavy duty vehicles, which contribute a disproportionate amount to air pollution, to our asthma, to our health. Looking at our diesel fleet, soon the city will be bringing on its first electric refuse vehicle. That's going to be taking pollution out of neighborhoods every day. And so I think helping cities move off of those highly polluting vehicles is important.
So the state can do that somehow, maybe.
Well, they could help with grants. There's a federal grant program, but supplementing it could help cities that are cash strapped make those investments. I think geothermal is we've put in a grant application for geothermal. We've also put in a grant application for another electric refuse vehicle. Geothermal is a huge opportunity.
Helping people get geothermal energy in their homes.
And also for cities as a way to create a whole network of decarbonization. So there are communities in Massachusetts that are piloting neighborhood-scale geothermal, where it's essentially another utility that you can tap into. Instead of getting your heat from gas, you could tap into clean heat and cooling from a geothermal network, which gets more efficient as it grows.
That's really interesting. It always made me wonder whether we should be going to smaller neighborhood-based grids anyway, because you lose a lot of energy transmission. You send the solar from your house, it comes back over lines.
You don't lose too much, but with this approach, the other really key piece, and this ties into the investments we need to make in our schools as well, is that for geothermal, you can get a 30% payback from the federal government. Plus, New Haven's eligible for an additional 10% as a quote-unquote energy community with the designation that the federal government has, plus 10% for domestic content. So if you have a $10 million geothermal project, at the end of the day, you're eligible for $5 million in federal reimbursement. Okay. So if we can figure out how to pair that with the reimbursement structure for school construction, we could be making big investments in locking in improvements for our school facilities.
So you'd like to see the state tap federal funds to help and contribute to make neighborhood level geothermal grids, as well as introducing it to the schools as part of renovation.
The schools can be central nodes in these grids, right? So it could be, if you're smart about how you're designing it, and then we can use the Inflation Reduction Act funding to help.
So you're going to introduce that?
I think it's something we absolutely need to look at, and on the
it's a really interesting idea.
And it's also in other places been looked at as a mechanism for getting us off of gas. So it's in Massachusetts, it's actually the gas utilities that are leading the pilots. So it's an off-ramp. Framingham is the Eversource project, and
so we have Eversource too.
Yeah.
Well, can I read you a critical comment about your campaign as
Sure.
related to this issue? Kevin McCarthy wrote in The Independent, Steve is a friend and a great guy. He would do a wonderful job as state rep. But I do wish he'd reconsider running now. There are other candidates, because he'd be conscientious, but he would earn pay in both roles as city sustainability director. His city office is a tiny staff. As industrious as Steve is, he cannot be in two places at once or add hours to the day. The work he's doing sustaining is viable, and rep would reduce the amount.
Well, I think it will be a balancing act if I'm elected, but it's one that I'm excited to take on. And there's really clear overlaps between the two roles. We are playing in a game that's been set up by the state in terms of the resources that are available, the laws and regulations about what we can and can't do. We look at the solar projects the city's working on, putting solar on the landfill. That just passed the City Plan Commission, and 2 solar parking canopies at schools. But it's just those 2 schools because the regulations didn't allow us to put solar on sites where we already had solar on roofs. And so we were able to advocate to get that, be part of folks advocating to get that changed, and it has been changed. So it opens up additional opportunities for us. It's similar to the,
So you're saying the roles can dovetail. Now, all legislators have 2 jobs because it's not a full-time job. What does it pay, like 30s or?
I think it's up to 40-ish.
Okay.
I don't.
So how is your position different or the same as other people navigating having a job in addition to the legislature? You're saying it could dovetail.
Well, I think it's the same in that virtually everyone up there has a full-time day job. But I think, there is a real opportunity here as somebody who's interacting every day with state policy on these issues to give an informed opinion and say, hey, we're trying to do this with electric vehicles. Why can you only get a rebate on a used electric vehicle if it's less than 3 years old? What if I want to buy a 2019 Chevy Bolt and get a great deal on it? Shouldn't someone in New Haven be able to do that and then drive emissions free with a really low cost.
You
I
seem-
use that as an example.
You seem
These are
excited
real-
about specifics. You could
Yeah,
do it there.
these are real world issues that we're seeing every day in our work, and they have real impacts in terms of our health, in terms of our affordability of life here in Connecticut. And so I would really want to be part of that and excited to be part of that. And
Well,
working
thank you
together
so
on
much
that.
for coming in. I'm sorry our hot water wasn't ready for the tea today. But before we go, I want you to tell me about a moment on the campaign trail that really sticks out in your mind so far about why you're running or what's at stake or what's possible.
A moment that sticks out about what's possible.
Or it just sticks out as a special moment on the trail.
I think we've just had so many good conversations with folks who are really excited about, like I said, youth services, climate, that are excited about, are really interested in housing and housing affordability. I think one moment that sticks out was just explaining to someone what Beulah Land Development Corporation is doing with their project on 340 Dixwell.
Affordable housing at the old Joe Grace.
Yeah, and how, like, you know, we look at climate change, it's this big problem. We look at housing affordability, it's this big problem. But there are these new models, right? Mass timber construction, where you can build a 16-story skyscraper out of wood. There are these new models that we could take advantage of, and just seeing their face light up of, wow, I never knew that's what that was. That there could be this new way of building housing that's affordable, that's energy efficient, and that can help us meet these multiple crises we're facing. That was like a really special moment, and the next time they walk or drive or bike down Dixwell and see that, they'll be able to say, like, wow, this is a living example of part of the solution. We need more of it.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Good luck back on the campaign trail. Thanks for making time to come back in.
Thanks for having me.
It's always fun to talk to you, Steve, on the air and
No
off.
worries about the tea. It's never happened before. It's always hot.
We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to second half at Dateline New Haven. We're going to be visiting with School Superintendent Madeline Negron. So hold tight while listening to the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free. Catch you on the rebound at WNHH FM.